President King and members of council, at our meeting last week regarding agenda preparation, President King asked me to make a short presentation to the council. And what I'm trying to do here tonight is to inform you of some of the procedural hurdles that we're going to have to jump over in order to accommodate charter changes as a part of the general election as opposed to having a special election. The biggest thing that we have to keep our eyes on is this July 25th date. That is a 100-day date out from the general election, which is published on the Secretary of State's calendar. So whatever action we're going to take that's council initiated, we really have to have it all together and to be passed on July 25th. Another date that sort of interplays into that and that will somewhat limit the ability of council to dance around in July is just a functional requirement of the clerks. According to the city charter in section 380, we have to publish all of our ordinances 2 times. The second publication occurs after final passage, but it's the first publication which must occur 10 days before final passage. So that's backing us up from July 25th. And I think there's also just a practical consideration. We can't know for sure that if we go to the newspaper of general circulation, on that 10th day that they're going to be able to do it. And so I'm sure that Sarah's staff, they give a couple of days leeway there. So knowing those 2 constraints that we have, we've looked at a suggested timeline. And this is sort of a project management type function. We've looked at the end of the process and tried to see what we need to do to get there. And it's my recommendation that for any of the charter amendments that the council would like to propose by ordinance, that we should shoot to providing those for discussion at a work session at your June 9th work session meeting, which we've still got time. We've got 30 days or so to draft some of these things, and some of them are relatively low-hanging fruit and fairly easy to draft. So I think that's an easily reachable goal. We would then look at a first reading on June 24th at your regular meeting. And this is a little bit of departure from custom. I think that we would have another meeting that would occur after the July 4th holidays. Is it the 9th or the 8th of July, which would be your next regular meeting. But we've left a little wiggle room in there just in case there's a feeling at that first reading that we need to make an amendment or take an alternative direction. The goal here is to minimize to the extent possible the calling of special meetings, also to hit that July 25th deadline and not to put any undue constraints on Sarah's office in hitting that 10-day notice window. So that's what we would recommend as a course of action so that we're not operating in crisis mode. I haven't had discussions with all of you, but from attending the meetings and our sessions and so forth, I've listed a few of the things that I know are at least being discussed out here. 2 weeks ago, we discussed the council oversight of audit and legislative employees, and the clear directive from council that we've already gotten on that is to establish council oversight for the auditor and the audit employees, and also to create an appointed position that would act as a legislative head, a chief of staff, if you will, for the legislative wing over here, and for the council to ultimately be having the oversight over the legislative employees as well. Currently, there's oversight by the mayor with respect to these employees. The next item that has been discussed is the council's legal representation and what charter amendments, if any, that we would need with those. We are still waiting for the city attorney's office ethics opinion on the attorney roles to come out. That's imminent. It could come out at any time. It's been under review with outside counsel, and that may limit some of the council's work here, and I'll touch on what we've already done to lay the foundation for that in a couple of slides ahead of here. One thing that if I could put a smiley face next to it would be the mayoral's need for signatures on utility contracts. I think everybody agrees that we need to streamline that process and remove the mayor from the loop on some of those. Two other things that have been mentioned, but I don't have a specific direction to the city attorney's office from the council, is the number of appropriation departments, and we've also had some talk of approaching eminent domain issues with charter amendments. And you know, I'm sure I don't have everything on here that is being discussed, but one of the things we want to have today is a direction and a go forward at the end of the discussion on what items you for sure want the city attorney's office to address and to draft. And we've still got a little bit of time to add things, but as we approach that June 9 work session, we're going to start to run out of time quickly in June. What did I do there? There we go. The status of the charter issues. Okay, one of the things that we've looked at is the auditor and the legislative staff issues, and so I wanted to at the lunch session that we had 2 weeks ago, we had resolved that we would have a committee with Councilmember Pico and Councilmember Knight, I believe, that we're going to head up the committee representation in terms of these things. In laying the foundation for potential charter changes, one thing we've already completed is a comprehensive review of the charter, the code, and the council rules provisions, and that's already been circulated to council members Knight and Pico, and anybody who wants a copy of that, just let me know. But we've simply gone through and highlighted sections of code and charter that may be in play. The next thing that's been completed last week was we have an initial draft of some charter red lines concerning the audit and legislative staff, and I think that went out late Thursday or Friday, and that's an initial discussion point that hits just the charter areas that need to be addressed if we're going to as a council accomplish this goal through charter amendments. So I guess I'm also looking for our committee to get together with members of the city attorney's office to make sure that we've hit all the bases that we need to in those, but we've got a good starting framework and some actual language to work with on those already. The next steps would be to put the agreed red lines into the proper form for passage and charter amendment consideration, and we want to do that after we've gotten the language more or less agreed to. What I would suggest that we're going to identify some areas of the code and the council rules that probably need to be looked at and changed, but if we're talking about a charter amendment that's not going to take effect until sometime after the November election, nobody probably is going to want to address a lot of new legislation in November and December with budgets and holidays and all those sorts of things. So my recommendation would be that after we get through July 25th, that we go ahead and continue on with the drafting of some of these ordinances, and if you would get a favorable outcome from the general election and whatever ballot measures you have, that we would have some ordinances and things ready to go later in the year. As far as the legal representation issue, we've again completed a comprehensive review of the charter to identify the code sections that are in play. As I mentioned earlier, the city attorney's office ethics policy is currently under draft, and we're expecting that really could be any day. And the next steps would be an initial draft of any charter red lines concerning attorney representation, so it'll sort of follow the same chain here. So I guess we're just looking for direction from council in terms of any additional charter items that you would like us to consider drafting on, and to take any questions that you have.
Okay, questions, comments? Councilmember Knight.
Yeah, from my recollection from our agenda planning meeting last time when we discussed this, on the city attorney, we were not going to do any charter changes at this election. We wanted to try and do that through code changes first, and that was Joel and myself working on that. So I got your thing that listed all there, but basically just going through, I started already going through 1- whatever it is, duties of the city attorney. You know, and it does already reference the professional conduct guide or whatever it's called. So I printed out all 179 pages of that and going through that. But I think for November, as I remember it, the only question that we really wanted to get on there was the staff. As far as the mayor signing does not have to sign CSU bonds because upcoming bonds, we don't want to do that in November. We want to do that in the April election.
Okay, Councilmember Bennett.
Don took care of mine.
Okay. All right, other
We need to just talk.
comments?
I got one.
Councilmember Miller.
Yeah, I think we agreed to try to tackle it with ordinance first, but we left it on the table for the attorney one. We didn't take it completely off. At least that's my recollection of it.
I think we took it off.
Okay. And I don't know, the budgetary departments, I really think we've probably taken care of that in an ordinance. We just have to make sure that the other parts of the charter are followed and following the ordinances. As far as, I don't remember ever mentioning the eminent domain thing for a charter change to the attorney's office, but that's actually the direction I'd rather go, because I think getting 80% of the population would be a lot easier than getting 5 votes. So, and if you look at measures that are similar, everywhere it's at least 75% approval. So now it's the question of getting 5 to get it to the ballot, but I would certainly like to see what that kind of language would look like.
So if I could are there any others? If I can recap here, and forgive me for intruding, President King, but we have a consensus that we want to go forward with the audit and legislative employee portions of this. The attorney ordinance is on hold right now. We're not going to address the signature of the mayor at the present time, and we'll take that up at a later date for an April election. And I think that's
Mayor's signature for bonds.
right.
Not in November.
For April.
Wait, that would be in April?
So we won't be taking that up right now.
Okay. Okay. Councilmember Snyder first.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with Councilmember Knight. I recall, I think 4 months ago, when we started talking about these possible ballot items, as we said, I think it was agreed at a lunch that there's one thing that we may want to have for the November ballot, and that's the council employee thing. And I guess just like the military, we've had the mission creep here. So I would, agree with Don. Let's go forth with the language for that. If we want to do some of these other topics, in my view, they should be done in a much slower paced environment. I've gone through a ballot issue once just as a volunteer to try to get a public safety sales tax on the ballot back in 2008. It's tough to do one thing at a time. So I would suggest we get the most important one, which I think is the council employee, and make that the only one right now.
Well, I think we've got an excellent start to embody the council's desires with respect to some of those changes, and I look forward to continuing on with Mr. Pico and Knight and the city attorney's office to get that done in a timely way so that we can avoid creating any crises with this.
Okay, Councilmember Knight.
Yeah, David, just a point of order. You said we'll wait on the attorney ordinance, no, we'll wait on the attorney charter change.
Well,
But the attorney ordinance, we do need to make some ordinance changes for the city attorney, the powers and duties, incorporating the ethics policy, that type of stuff. We want to have, still want to move out on that on a reasonable, sane and reasonable, and not, we don't need it done tomorrow, but, it needs to be on top of our priority queue.
Okay. Brett, go ahead.
If I could have a moment, President King and members of council, just to comment, the mayor's not supportive of charter amendments. I think I know he's spoken to you, President King, and maybe President Pro Tem Bennett about community leadership doing a comprehensive review on the charter, and he's very open to that principle and that concept, and just want to reiterate that. So.
Yeah, I have had some conversation with the mayor about that issue, and so we've had some discussion about who would fit on that committee, who would not fit on that committee, and whether or not this can be done with an MOU or not an MOU. And so I think we proceed on parallel paths and have it go ahead and work on this, and then see if we can do something with the mayor at the same time. So that'd be great. Councilmember Miller.
Was there not an MOU before that was eliminated? Could I get a little bit of history on that?
There was an MOU that predated the, I'm going to get corrected here if I say this wrong. No pressure. There was an MOU that predated the election establishing the council mayor form of government. And I think that one's been superseded, but there's been a subsequent MOU that addresses the delegation of certain authority to the city auditor's office. And so that's where the current lay of the land is. I mean, I've got that MOU if you would like to see it.
Because there was one that we got sent to us today, I thought. Is that just an old one, a copy of an old one?
The most current one is the one that's from 2013, and if my memory serves me, Tracy Lessig was the author of that document, and it reiterates a lot of the sort of the charter points and cites several of the charter sections that we've identified in our current review that maybe need to be addressed.
Because this one says the mayor will suspend or remove such employees only with the recommendation of city council, so we're obviously not under that one.
What's the date on that one?
It doesn't have a date, it was just a...
No,
So is this a proposed one?
That's not an MOU. I don't know what that proposal is.
Because the subject was an MOU, and
I was asked to provide language that would accommodate that to Mr. King, and that may be what you're looking at. It may have been circulated, but
okay, so this is proposed.
That's correct. And I don't know what the status of those negotiations would be.
Okay.
Have you got an update?
I do have a little update. I've spoken with Tracy about this. I've also spoken with Denny about this, and I've spoken with the mayor about this. The issue with regard to MOUs that delegate authority over city employees is that our reading of the charter does not permit the mayor to delegate to a non-city employee. He can delegate to the chief of staff supervision and hire, fire, discipline of employees, but he can't delegate to Denny because Denny is not a city employee, he is a council appointee. Okay, so that was part of what the prior issue was with the prior MOU. When I've been talking with the mayor, unless there is some type of charter change that identifies legislative employees, city employees, auditor employees, and then kind of reestablishes who has hire, fire, supervision, discipline authority over those categories of employees. The discussion that he had with President King and President Pro Tem Bennett was, is there some way we can cooperate? And so while I believe President King and the mayor and President Pro Tem Bennett were talking about at the end of the process with regard to discipline and things, when I was conversing with the mayor, my thought was, that's a little late in the process, and maybe what we ought to be doing is focusing on standards of conduct. And my suggestion to the mayor was, let's get Eileen as a supervisor of the current council staff, and perhaps Mike Sullivan and Tracy involved, and come up with standards of conduct for legislative employees as those activities impact operations of the municipal government, so that it was clear what would be expected of the employees, so hopefully we wouldn't have to get to the discipline part of the program. And that's what he had suggested. I have not had an opportunity to talk to Eileen or to Mike Sullivan, but it seemed like the more fair thing to do. Why wait until the very end? Why not say, here's the standards of conduct, just like we have for any city employee. Here's your job description, here's what's expected, here are the things you're supposed to avoid. But we didn't really have that for council employees as their jobs impact municipal operations, and it seemed like we needed to fill that void. And so the mayor had authorized me to go ahead and try to work on that. So that's what I had as an update. I was going to try to share it tomorrow at your lunch, but as long as we're here and on the topic.
Okay, well, maybe we can talk about it more tomorrow, but you said that the mayor cannot delegate to council, but he can delegate to an employee.
He can delegate to employees under his control. So he could delegate to the chief of staff. He could delegate to the parks director with regard to those employees. We'd have to look at that because what the council was after was more impact on discipline. And I'm not sure that the mayor can delegate that.
I'm more interested in hiring and firing than I am in discipline. I mean, the discipline wasn't an issue because I don't even think that Mr. Culpepper's issue would have resulted in discipline. So to me, it's strictly hiring and firing. And it sounds like we'd have to do that with a charter change.
Councilmember Pico.
I think
Oh, I'm
another
sorry,
way.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
What?
Go ahead, go ahead. I didn't. Go ahead. We'll let Val go after you.
I was looking at that more as it's an issue of lines of authority and accountability as opposed to standards of conduct. The issue is who is going to have the lines of authority. That draft memo that floated around here kind of sort of addressed it, but as you say, it doesn't work, if I understand your comments correctly, unless that line of authority went to the council administrator. If
Right.
it was delegated, that is
And-
something that could be executed now.
Right, but that would require a charter change.
Why would it require a charter change if she is currently under a city employee?
Well, because she continues to be under, subject to the employment authority of the mayor. And I thought the whole
Right.
purpose was to have your council staff subject to the employment authority of the council.
Right.
That will require a charter change. With regard to hiring and firing, currently, the mayor is still in control. He's pretty much let the council administrator and the council members choose the job description. Is that fair? Yeah.
Yes.
And you review the applications, you've chosen whom to interview, you have made the offers. He just asked for review of this last employee, and that I think was the beginning of the issue. But if council wants supervision and control over legislative employees such as Eileen and her staff, that will require a charter change.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Snyder.
Yes, Keith, you mentioned, I think about 500 words ago, that you're working on something in tandem with the mayor on a charter review committee. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, we've had this, I brought up a discussion many months ago about trying to put together a committee of people to look at what would be appropriate for charters. We have never gotten it done, and the mayor and I had a conversation again about a week ago to put together some kind of a committee. We've had a discussion about who would be going on the committee and who would not be going on the committee. And we haven't gotten any further than that because the mayor kind of wants a certain group of people on his side to be on the committee, and I want a group of people that would be pro-legislative council, and to make sure that we have a balance between the two. So I've been trying to vet some names with people and come up with some ideas, and then also get back to the mayor and see if he would be agreeable to those type of people and have a committee, but at the same time also be working on this going forward, where we would just put together this with David and kind of get a basis for how the discussion would go.
And when would council have input on those names?
Well, as soon as we kind of get a feel for whether or not we can, the mayor has a group of people that he thinks would be good, and I think if we can find a group of people that would be good to have an acceptable process, then we'd bring it with those frameworks together to council and have a discussion about whether or not to even go forward with it. So it's all kind of preliminary, and Merv and I have had some discussions with it, and so, I don't know, Merv, you might want to say some things
I
too.
just wanted to add that there's also been two individuals, Kathy Lou and Phil Lane, who have come to us, both to the mayor and to Keith and me, recommending a process that would be totally apolitical in their opinion.
So I've kind of, without getting too specific about names, I've suggested some names too, and I continue to try and find some names that would be kind of in that ballpark, but also kind of look at the balancing out the membership, and so that's kind of what I'm looking at, so.
Well, just let us know that we will continue to serve at the prerogative of council here in terms of your direction. The consensus we have here is to proceed on several tracks now with respect to these, and so we'll do what we can to deliver work product in a timely manner until we're otherwise directed.
Okay. All right, further discussion or questions, comments? Okay, I think we're down to